Finding the Baha'i faith has really changed my understanding of what it's like to be a person with a soul on this planet. It's going beyond all barriers and concepts that we have hold true and are attached to right now, but it's very, very forward thinking to what's the capacity that humanity has for the future. Is there any remover of difficulties, save God? My name is Greta Anderson. I was born in New Jersey in the United States and was raised in Minnesota. My family raised me as a unificationist, which for those that know Reverend Moon, he's from Korea, and it's a very, very small religion. In my family there are my two parents, and I am the third daughter. I have two older sisters and a younger brother. After graduating high school, I went to college at the University of Minnesota and then transferred to the University of Bridgeport, which is in Connecticut. It's a small school. I got a scholarship for graphic design. After my studies, I did some sales jobs. I worked in New York at a magazine. I was the art director for a spiritual newspaper that was converting into a magazine. From there, I ended up traveling to some different countries. I lived in Turkey, I lived in Israel, Palestine, and then moved to Uganda. I declared as a Baha'i in Kampala, Uganda. I went to Israel, or near Bethlehem, on a school trip. I was the secretary at my school for a program called Service for Peace, and they do a program each year to travel abroad, like an international service program. And it was a 2-week program, and we were working with a community in the West Bank and building a school and things like this. At this time, I was really open-minded spiritually and was thinking about readjusting my spiritual values from my parents' upbringing. There were some things I loved about the faith, but then also didn't seem correct in my heart. So at the end of our time at the service project, we went to Haifa as tourists. And that's where I heard about the faith for the first time. It was at the World Center, and we heard from our tour guide about just the basic principles of the Baha'i faith. I didn't meet my first Baha'i until 2 years after that visit. And I would just sometimes look up quotes on the internet or something, but I didn't study the background very much. I just thought it was really beautiful. I really liked from the tour guide, they said that elimination of all prejudices. And to me that was really important for a religion to have that as part of their foundation. It was to have love of all mankind, and the oneness of God was really important to me, that the religions agree was important to me. And so when I heard this in Haifa, I was like, okay, I can trust whatever these writings or quotes from this faith talk about. In the church where my family raised me, there was a big emphasis on that one family under God, that we're one global family. But the problem is they expected you to marry somebody that was born into the church. And so if I didn't find, all the families started to grow very insular, and people lived in kind of their own bubble. It was like they weren't connected with the rest of the world. And I said, how are we going to be one family under God if we don't reach out to all these other people that live here and we don't understand their life? And so, I just asked this question, why is the world so disunited? And there's got to be a solution that every human being on the planet can understand and relate to. There's got to be a spiritual truth outside of this truth or that truth, but a foundation of all of them. And so I felt like it was incomplete. You can't say one family under God if you're not willing to see the rest of the world and to, agree with them and to elevate understanding and so forth. I was in Connecticut and I was finishing my studies, and I wasn't really spiritually practicing much of anything. Still would have a relationship with God, but was not so much interested in religion anymore. And then my senior year of college, the first semester was really difficult, and I found myself really needing guidance. And so when that semester was over, I was like, you know what, I think I need to be practicing some spiritual obedience here. And that's when I decided to reach out to a Baha'i, and I went on the website and looked to contact somebody to meet me. First time they came to my school, and we just sat in the library over a cup of tea and talked a little bit about the faith and a little bit about Baha'u'llah and like what I was studying. It was very informal. It was nice. And then they invited me to 2 firesides, and they came to my my graduation gallery exhibit. They, as the graphic designers, have a display of their work, and so these 2 spiritual teachers, supported me. They kind of, at the end of my college career, I felt like they were really there to support me, almost like parents that, weren't there for me. I had the opportunity in this job in New York to save some money, and it was a really lucky thing because I didn't want to just work 60 hours a week, and I wanted to really explore something bigger than that, especially while I was young. I was 23, 24 years old, and I said, you know what, I want to learn why the world is so disunited, so I'm going to go travel. I'm going to go to different places and try to meet people from other cultures and other religious backgrounds and in other languages, and really try to understand just a glimpse of the human conditions outside of the United States. And I never did much international travel by myself ever. And I got a job as a nanny or an au pair in Turkey, in Istanbul. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take my savings and go to Istanbul and live there until I know where to go next. And so I spent maybe 13 months going to a total of 10 different countries, just trying to volunteer in different organizations and pray in different religious places. I went to synagogues and all the holy places you can imagine, and went to mosques in Egypt and in Cairo and Alexandria. And I don't know, I really was open, had a huge open heart, was totally trusting God, the whole journey. And my family thought I was crazy because I'm like a 23-year-old girl that is by herself with no plan and wandering around in the Middle East. And they didn't know what I was doing, but I knew what I was doing, and that was following my heart, and that was really like trying to understand people from different places. So I lived in Muslim majority countries and Jewish majority countries and Christian majority countries, and the whole time through I had a Baha'i prayer book. Two and a half years ago, it was Easter Sunday of 2013. I was at the House of Worship in Kampala, Uganda. My last organization that I went to volunteer with, I was working with schools and in an orphanage and helping getting scholarships for families. And at that time, I got to know some of the Baha'is in Uganda. So my first Baha'i community was really an African community. And that's where I studied Book 1. And I was really preparing myself, feeling like, you know what, I think I really love this, so I want to learn more and be very intentional about it. So the last 3 months I was traveling, I was really getting ready to declare. Because I had that brief experience in a Muslim majority country, I actually really, really fell in love with the Middle East, and it kind of fascinated me, even though I didn't know much about it. So maybe if I had never made that trip to like the Holy Land, I would not have this kind of love and the mysticism. I also was a big lover of Rumi, the Sufi poet, and so I don't know, I felt like the writings were poetic. My family raised me in a pretty small and somewhat strict church, and they really, really believed that I would stay with this religion my whole life and marry somebody within the church. And I was so grateful that they raised me in a religious foundation, but I didn't think that when I told them they would understand. So it took me a lot of courage to be able to tell them. After traveling for that amount of time, I ended up going back to my parents' house in Minnesota for just 2 months or 3 months. And it took me, almost until the end of my time living with them that I told them that I was a Baha'i. And I found this faith, and it means a lot to me. When I moved back to my family's house in Minnesota after traveling and just recently declared as a Baha'i, there was an announcement from the Universal House of Justice that there would be over 100 conferences around the world for youth ages 15 to 30 years old to get together and to learn how to live a life of service and friendship and education. So it was very, very relevant to me, who was deciding what should I do, what's the most valuable with my time and energy right now. Before going to this youth gathering, I thought the Baha'i faith was just like a really, really beautiful spiritual understanding that came from Persia and believed in the oneness of humanity. It was a global religion, and it was just so beautiful. But then after I went to the youth gatherings, I saw this like whole other dynamic and perspective of the faith that I had no idea was happening. And that was that it's a very, very active faith, It's not just talking about the oneness of humanity, but it's doing work. A lot of intentional work, like meeting people out of your comfort zone to like introduce them to this faith and to create programs that improve their lives and their happiness. And I've never seen, I did all these volunteer experiences with different organizations in other countries, and I didn't see anything at all this beautiful, compared to all these other organizations. So I was pretty excited that I could be involved with something this meaningful that was also aligned with, my newfound faith. And the youth gathering showed me a lot of other friends that were my age, that were devoted to learning how to live a life of service to the world and, of their own spiritual growth. And I thought it was a super warm conference. If I didn't go to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't have done a period of service. I really think those conferences shaped a lot of how I see my life as a Baha'i today. I moved to North Carolina after a couple months of being with my family in Minnesota because my oldest sister lives there. And she had just had her first baby, so my nephew. And I went there with the intention of just babysitting for a few months, maybe half a year, to help her out so she could go back to work. But then after 2 or 3 months, I really missed, praying with Baha'is. And so I went to my first feast in North Carolina with that community and started to get involved with other youth and building friendships there. So I'm about 10 months of doing a period of service. I was really debating if I should go to grad school or not, graduate school. And I thought that this was my plan. I was really excited about it. I got accepted to a very good program in Seattle, Washington. And I thought that it would be perfect. Lots of job opportunities. Seems very interesting, but it's also very expensive, and maybe I would just end up working and not being able to serve the faith because I would be so invested in my career, and it'd be difficult to have a time for family or, service to the faith and so forth. So I said, okay, I'm gonna postpone my enrollment for 1 year and just do a period of service. And then feel like maybe God will confirm if I should go to graduate school or if I should find a way to have a job that allows me to serve the faith and still work and employ myself from my undergraduate degree. And so now I've decided not to go. Being a Baha'i and being an educated person, it's not that you choose one or the other, but you try to find an education that helps you be a better Baha'i. So right now I traveled to Maryland for a campaign or an intensive study of Book 7. We're learning how to be tutors so that we can help guide friends through study circles. And in addition to studying this material, we're also doing a lot of practical, active work in a neighborhood very close to here. We are meeting youth and parents in the neighborhood. We show some videos and we have conversations about Baha'i-inspired programs, how this is to make better communities. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God, save, praise be God. He is God, all are His servants, and all abide by His bidding. I think there's a time in most people's life where they really ask, what is God and why am I here? And this is my story of how I found God and the love of the Baha'i faith.